In the concluding session of the 5th India Forum on China at Goa, organized by the Institute of Chinese Studies, the India Office of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, and Goa University. Chairing this session this evening is Professor Alka Acharya, Honorary Director of the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi, and Professor at the Center for East Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. We have amidst us a renowned China scholar and teacher, Professor B.R. Deepak, Professor at the Center for Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, to deliver the valedictory address. Trained in Chinese studies at the Peking University, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and the University of Edinburgh, Professor Deepak has worn many hats. He has been a Nehru and Asia Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Beijing, and has several publications to his credit. Some of his recent publications include India's China Dilemma, The Lost Equilibrium and Widening Asymmetries, India and China, Beyond the Binary Friendship and Enmity, China's Global Rebalancing and the New Silk Road, and My Tryst with China. He has also translated numerous works in Chinese to vernacular languages. His translations from Chinese to Hindi and English include China and India, Dialogues of Civilizations, and Chinese Poetry, 1100 BC to 1400 AD, a translation of 85 selected classical poems, for which he has been awarded the 2011 Special Book Prize of China. He also writes a fortnightly Eye on China column for the Sunday Guardian. On behalf of everyone, I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. Dr. Aravind Yelery, co-convener of the 5th IFC at Goa and senior research fellow at Peking University, Beijing, and adjunct fellow at ICS, will sum up the deliberations of the conference. This will be followed by remarks from Dr. Adrian Haack, Director, Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, New Delhi. And finally, Colonel K. Roy, Research Fellow, Institute of Chinese Studies, will deliver the vote of thanks. Without further ado, I will now invite the chair to begin the proceedings. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening and welcome to the final session. This is one of those sessions which really does not require a chair, but I guess it comes in the category of mandatory but highly unnecessary. This is a session which will regulate itself. So let me call upon our valedictory address deliverer to deliver this final speech at this 5th IFC. Professor Deepak.
Thank you, Chair. It's my honor and privilege to deliver this valedictory speech after 2 days of serious deliberations. I would like to take this opportunity to record my heartfelt thanks to the host of this prestigious 5th India Forum in China in Goa for extending an earnest invitation to me. I regret to miss the welcome dinner on 26th and a few sessions of the forum on 27th morning, yesterday. Nevertheless, the sessions I attended were extremely enriching. I learned a lot from the expertise of young and old China hands. The topic of my speech is Xi Jinping's China, denouncing the era of crossing the river by filling the stones. I think after 2 days of deliberations, I really don't have anything new to add. Perhaps would further bore you people, through these 30 minutes or so. But nonetheless, I would like to, quote one thing from perhaps this. Wan Tiejun. In fact, it is his. Most of my remarks is based on the Chinese sources, and Wan Tiejun's work is one of them. In fact, when Alka asked me if I meant renouncing in place of denouncing, in the title, I replied that the Chinese, they perhaps meant both. Because renouncing in Chinese, it is fangqi. And denouncing in Chinese, it is qianze. Yeah, so perhaps both renouncing and denouncing, crossing the river by filling the stones in the new era. That's why I settled for denouncing in my title. She said both were excessive. These stones, according to Wan Tiejun, a top agriculture economist of China, were symbolic norms defined by the West. In other words, treading the path one defined by the Western institutions of international order. It is in the new era that this deviation of the party has been corrected, and moreover, since Xi Jinping believes that this bridge has already been built, there is no need to feel the stones by the Chinese, when they are crossing the river. And perhaps the bridge the Chinese they have constructed is better than these stones, they felt all these years during the period of reforms. So this is one thing I would perhaps further expound a little bit later, because the Chinese wisdom and approach which have been talked about, 中国智慧, 中国方案, or the so-called 中国模式, the Chinese model, it has been pitched against these crossing the river by filling the stones, according to Professor Wan Tiejun. In fact, the debate here started by the turn of last century, but it has gained momentum recently, and it has been republished after the 20th Party Congress this year. Like any researcher, I wish to start by making a few assumptions to expound my thinking on the topic. These, as I've said, that these are based on these Chinese sources, which I refer to. I have made 4 assumptions, in fact, all of them, so they are incorporated in the abstract, but not numbered. My first assumption is, as China increasingly faces national and international challenges, the economy in command has paved way for politics in command in Xi Jinping's new era. A slide towards weak, hollow, and watered-down party leadership of the reform era confirms the contradiction that those in the CPC who have not inherited the good red genes, 红色基因, these are the wording of Xi Jinping, have eroded the legitimacy of the party. Hence, the banner and line of Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era must be held high by the Chinese people, so as the color of China, China's mountains and rivers, is not changed. And the path, theory, system, and culture evolved by the party over the years is not weakened and compromised. So that is my first assumption. And the second assumption is, with this thinking, China appears to expand the scope of people's ownership across the enterprises for better regulation and control. This is in sync with China wanting to establish a new unified national health information platform by 2025, at the same time bringing discourses such as internal circulation, third distribution to fulfill the goals of common prosperity, and the central task, 一个中心任务, which has been defined in 20th Party Congress report for realizing the second centenary goals. My third assumption is, in the global context, I think this has been deliberated by various scholars, but I put it slightly in different perspective when I'm talking about China's foreign policy. In global context where peace is elusive, conflicts raging across the continents, when the world is witnessing deficit in areas of development and governance, the discourse of power emanating from China in the form of building community with shared future for humanity and Chinese-style modernization certainly would add a new perspective, an alternative that essentially denounces the dominated Western discourse on development. So this is, again, why I use denounced in my title. The fourth one is, as for India, China will not be averse to do business, but will continue to deny India space, whether at regional or global stage, owing to the widening asymmetries and the lost equilibrium. So now I'll expound briefly all of these assumptions. As regards the first assumption, I wish to draw your attention to the recently concluding 2022 China International Import Expo in Shanghai, where the Buick of General Motors ran a promotional video. I think General Narasimha perhaps has gone through it, so he is smiling there. That had a line, 一把坐上去就不想下来的椅子. So that is the seat that you never wish to get off when you occupy. Of course, the advertisement was removed and the event was cancelled. We have seen these protests, anti-zero COVID protest, all of the places, and the kind of literary inquisition that has gripped China in recent years demonstrates that to what banner and general line the party and the people will adhere to. 拿什么旗帜，走什么路线. I think so that is very, very crucial, and it has been made clear by the top leadership that it has to be followed from top to bottom. As it is clear from the 20th National Congress of the CPC, it is going to be the banner and line of Xi Jinping thought all the way. And for the execution of this line, Xi's people or Xi's army, Xi Jiajun, from Fujian, Zhejiang, Shanghai, Party School, and Shanxi, Gansu, Ningxia region, they have been placed all over the places, be it Central Committee, be it Politburo, and the Politburo Standing Committee. And Hu Jintao's removal from the concluding session also shows which political direction China is heading towards. Now, to uphold the banner and line of Xi Jinping's thought is deemed an absolute necessity, for the leadership has come to believe that the situation of lax and loose governance of the party, 宽松软状况, during the reform era has been fundamentally reversed by the strict and hard governance of the party. 严实硬, this is the word they have been using. The strict and hard governance is a pointer to the so-called self-purification, self-improvement, self-innovation, self-revolution, so and so forth. But more importantly, adherence to political correctness by way of grasping notions such as two upholds, 两个维护, and two establishes, 两个确立. I will not expound into them since I think we should be concluding it within 30 to 40 minutes. And other concepts like 以人民为中心, people-centric philosophy, 5 spheres of integrated plan, 五位一体, or what Javin in the morning pointed to the 4 confidence or the 4 matters of confidence. 四个自信, which again, refers to the kind of confidence they should be having in the path, in the theory, and in the system and culture evolved by the Communist Party of China. Now, who were responsible for the lax and loose governance or a slide towards weak, hollow, and watered-down party leadership? Obviously, the fingers are raised towards people like Jiang Zemin, Zhu Rongji, Hu Jintao, and Wen Jiabao, who cared little to the color of China's mountains and rivers, for these people did not inherit the good red genes, implying that only the likes of Xi Jinping, who have revolutionary genes and flesh and blood relationship with the masses, are entitled to and will carry forward the legacy of China's revolution. No wonder Xi Jinping has been reiterating that no one would be allowed to change the color of China's mountains and rivers, and the red genes would be transferred from generation to generation so as the path, ideology, system, and culture could be protected and not compromised. Now, people may argue, didn't the reform era contribute to the evolution of the matters of our confidence? Listen to another age of Xi Jinping, in which he says, the country is its people, the people are the country. The CPC led the people to fight for the country. 江山就是人民，人民就是江山。中国共产党领导人民打江山。So if people are Jiangshan, and Jiangshan are the people, and Chinese Communist Party leading Jiangshan to fight Jiangshan, then it's really, a chicken and hen story. Contradictions apart, Xi Jinping has indeed struck hard on the big tech companies of China, which are run by the relatives of big bigs of reform period and are believed to be the white gloves of Shanghai clique. For example, Poyu Capital is run by Jiang Zemin's grandson, Jiang Zhicheng. CICC Alpha was run by Zhu Yunlai, son of Premier Zhu Rongji. Ping An Insurance is managed by the relative of the former Premier Wen Jiabao. The CITIC Capital is run by Liu Lefei, son of former Politburo Standing Committee member Liu Yunshan. Many of these capitals have big stakes in Titi Chuxing and Alibaba's Ant Group. And it is also, clear that big corporations or big sectors like power, it is in the hands of Li Peng and his family, and telecom in China, it is owned by Jiang Zemin and his relatives. So you can imagine it is also for the fear of political as well as financial coups by the detractors that Xi Jinping has taken ultimate control of party and government in China. It is perhaps owing to this reason that Xi Jinping is busy providing personal guidance and deployment, 亲自指挥,亲自部署, and now during G20 Bali summit, we have witnessed 亲自战狼 when he reprimanded Trudeau, in front of the glares of camera glares. So this was, a little expansion of my first assumption. As far as the second assumption, to be fair, China, the economy under Xi Jinping has not done that bad. If the statistics released by, the National Bureau of Statistics are to be believed, China's burgeoning economic strength has been catapulted to $17.2 trillion from around $8.5 trillion when he took the reins of the government of the party in 2012. Per capita income rose from $6,000 to over $12,000 in 10 years of his rule. Urbanization registered an impressive growth, fastest perhaps, of all the regimes. reaching around 64.7% from 52% when he took office. More than 100 million people were elevated from poverty. Its middle class swelled to 400 million people, which is likely to expand to 800 million between 2021 and 2035. So this is the projection they have made for while they are realizing the first step of the modernization between 2020 to 2035. Undoubtedly, this is no match for Hu Jintao's decade when GDP touched 8.3 trillion US dollar from a meager dollar 1.20 trillion. But the era of laissez-faire economy is long over in China. This could be gleaned from the number of factors, as I would will elaborate on them one by one. Number one, if we look at the growth of reform era, it was driven by massive government investment, accounting for around 45% of the GDP. And most of it, over 30%, went into the real estate, as Chinese citizens invested almost 70% of their savings in the real estate. But now, owing to the real estate bubble bust and bad debt crisis, the ancillary industries like cement, steel, glass, including the tiles, and household appliances have been adversely affected. Home prices in dozens of cities have plummeted by more than 20% this year alone. Therefore, even if the government spends massive funds in infrastructure development, such as roads and railways, the return on investment will be a big issue. The real estate sector has maximum bad debts amounting to 7.7 trillion US dollars. Second, bad finances of local government, which Professor Shen was discussing with me a little while back, amounting to over 4 trillion US dollar is another issue. Since land was the cash cow for the village collectives and the realtors, with the real estate bust, this steady source of income has been lost. Three, dynamic zero COVID policy. I think I will not delve into much about this. This has been delved into. But a few instances which are really disturbing and shocking, whereby the main gates, the doors of the houses are locked and even welded by these so-called tabai, big whites, mostly representing Juwei Hui or Cunming Hui, mostly from these two sections, who doesn't have any local standi as far as imposing these rules and regulations on the people are concerned. It is the legal enforcement agencies, Zheng Fa Wei. So they should be doing it, not these people. And we have seen, the kind of slogans have been shouted in Shanghai. Xi Jinping 下台, 共产党下台. Xi Jinping stepped down, Communist Party of China, step down. And the similar slogans have been shouted by one of, they call Yong Shi, one of the hero in Chongqing, when he shouted, take my liberty, give me liberty, and then take away my life, 不自由, 无宁死. So this was the slogan he shouted. And Tsinghua University yesterday, so they have also been shouting slogans, 民主, 法治, 民主, democracy, 法治, rule of law. So that means if Tsinghua universities are shouting these slogans, so this is denouncement of the whole process democracy which China has been arguing of late. Depreciation of RMB is a serious challenge that will impact the overall GDP of China. This year alone, the RMB has depreciated by 12%. China-US trade war has been talked about, and I think here, if you see the overall trade volume of China and the United States, it's not affected that much, except the items where heavy tariffs such as 25% have been levied. So these products, they have plummeted from 22%, so to say 15 to 18%, but overall decline is around 18%. But mostly it is in the high-tech sector, and semiconductor is one of the main issue, and we have seen how the Huawei smartphones, they have been rattled by this ban, semiconductor ban. And of course, China has tried to find its own way out in the form of like big data, which was created in 2014. As of now, 142,900 chip-related companies are working in China, and every year, thousands are added to these. This year alone, 30,800 companies have been added to the chip manufacturing industry in China. Of course, they are yet to make breakthrough in the smaller nanometer semiconductors, say below 7 or perhaps also below 10. But China is trying its best. They know that this is the fuel of the next industrial revolution. So Xi Jinping's third term and increasingly inward-looking policy that talks of common prosperity, inner circulation, and third distribution have shattered the hopes of SMEs and that once acted as the backbone of China's reforms and social mobility. No wonder the SCMP report that in the first 11 months of this year, some 4.37 million of China's smallest businesses have been permanently shut down. As regards the big companies, some 460,000 enterprises have been shut. The unemployment rate amongst the youth have reached 19.3%, a big worry for the Chinese government. And no wonder this Urumqi fire incident have been taken as an excuse by the young youths over 53 universities and campuses around China and are protesting. Widening social inequalities arising out of the nexus between political and economic powers within the party state has become a new Achilles heel of the party. Statistics reveal that the top 0.14% households in China, they own 1/3 of China's wealth. Last year, Premier Li Keqiang, so he contradicted President Xi Jinping when he said that more than 600 million Chinese people, they live on a monthly income of just 1,000 yuan, almost $140. And then many Chinese, they are doing the flexi jobs, 灵活就业, implying that these many people are doing more than 1 or 2 jobs at the same time in order to secure their livelihood. So in the face of these challenges, what direction China, the economy, is expected to take in the new era, the Chinese leaders have come to believe that the reform period has diluted the control of the party by way of individual or private enterprises, which in the long run will question the legitimacy of the party. Hence, the emphasis on bigger state-owned entities has been given. Wen Tiejun's notion, which he has expounding in a recent article, calling it the people's economy, having characteristics such as independent, localized, and people's ownership as characteristics. The concept of supply and marketing corporations, cooperative, the co-ops in the United States they are called, the 中国供销社, state-run canteens, 国营食堂, and public-private joint operation, 公私合营, concepts of yesteryears are gaining currency, though I don't believe China will go back to the rationing system of the Mao era. Nevertheless, the SOEs under the new structural adjustment, pronounced as one industry, one enterprise, or the mixed ownership, are likely to get lion's share in times to come. Though the economic construction as a center. So, 经济建设为中心, this was the slogan of the reform era. It has given way to one central task, 中心任务, so as to realize the second centenary goal. The period between 2020 to 2035 is crucial when China wants to realize the socialist modernization by raising per capita income of its citizens to around $30,000 US. In the words of Tang Yunjun, Deputy Chief Economist with the China Center for International Economic Exchange, China will achieve the goal of becoming a medium-level developed country in per capita GDP terms by 2035, even if China's average annual growth rate is 4.5% between 2025 to 2030 and about 4% between 2030 and 2035. Here again, I think there is a little adjustment made by China, because if you read Lin Yufei, another top economist of China, so he says that China need to maintain at least 5 to 6% growth rate between 20 and 2035 in order to reach the desired per capita GDP of $30,000 US. To achieve these goals, China cannot afford to go back to the closed-door policy, 闭门锁国. It will remain one of the largest exporters of manufacturing goods to the world and will continue to selectively open up economy for FDI, as it has been happening. During COVID, Germany alone, they invested $10 billion US in China, and Scholz's visit is testimony of that. And China is also opening some of the sectors for FDI. For example, recently it opened insurance and tourism sector that have huge potential. So China's economic fundamentals, I think they are still strong and undergone structural changes required by the time. For example, service sector, it represents around 54% of China's economic output. Manufacturing and industrial sector represents nearly 38%, and agriculture is third largest sector, contributing to almost 7.5%. Now, as far as the third assumption is concerned, it is primarily relating to China's foreign policy, and it has been delved in previous sessions also, but I think I have a slightly different take on that. The basic premise of, I relate it to the discourse theory. The basic premise of discourse theory is that human use communication, whether verbal or written, to construct knowledge and truth. Michel Foucault argues that the knowledge and truth that shape our lives is created through discourse by people in power. The Western discourse of power in the 20th century was so powerful that the marginalized world found it difficult to counter it with an alternative discourse. It is only in recent years that emerging economies have been able to find some space in the Western discourse. Of these, China appears to have more innovative in offering an alternate discourse of power, be it the true multilateralism of the BRICS, AIB, SCO, or the twin pillars of foreign policy, or a more recent construct of Chinese-style modernization. 中国式现代化. The larger framework of China's diplomacy is based on the so-called two pillars, two central pillars. One is to build the community with a shared future for humanity, 人类命运共同体, and a new type of international relation, that is the second pillar, 新型国际关系. The former was advocated by China on a number of occasions since 2013, elaborated in a keynote speech by Xi Jinping at the general debate of the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly in 2015. The idea is rooted in Chinese traditional philosophy of the world is one family, 天下一家, tantamount to our own Vasudeva Kutumbakam. The concept upholds that since interests, aspirations, and destinies of mankind are intertwined, therefore, the challenges are common and require common solutions. It is for this reason that the Chinese dream has been integrated with the desire of the people particularly of the developing countries, for building a peaceful, secure, and prosperous world that is open, inclusive, and ecologically friendly. The latter takes a new approach for developing state-to-state relations with mutual respect, fairness, justice, and win-win cooperation at its core, forging a new type of international relations Chinese believe will pave the way for a community with shared future for humanity. Other discourses such as Global Development Initiative, which was referred, Global Security Initiative, have been added to the basic framework of China's diplomacy of these two pillars. It is the second pillar that has two distinctive flanks, major country diplomacy and China's relationship with the BRI countries. Building a health Silk Road community with shared future in cyberspace, rolled out on 7th November, could be part of the GDI as well as GSI initiatives. The GSI is a precondition of the former and castigates the Cold War mentality, formation of blocks, small cliques, and old thinking of zero-sum game. On its part, China pledges not to seek hegemony, even if it goes on bullying its neighbors. I think as far as major country relationship is concerned, I will not delve into it. I will straight away jump to the Chinese-style modernization, which can be traced back to the self-strengthening movement of Qing dynasty, when the slogan was Chinese learning as essence, Western learning as application. After the collapse of the dynasty, the leading intellectuals of China, including Hu Shi, called for total westernization, and the science and democracy shaped the discourse during the May 4th movement of 1919. In 1937, when Mao Zedong wrote on contradictions, he was clear that Chinese socialism will not take the old historical road of the Western countries. In 1956, in a speech entitled On the 10 Major Relationships, Mao presented an alternative mode of socialism away from Soviet model and confirmed to the Chinese conditions and avoided errors made by the Soviet Union. Mao also denounced Soviet Union openly and drew a strategy to forge alliances with the like-minded forces, neutralize the neutral countries, and split and make use of force antagonistic to China. I think Xi Jinping is exactly repeating the same thing in 2022. So these discourses are no different from socialism with Chinese characteristics practiced by China during the reform period. However, it appears that in order to build a socialist market economy, China attempted crossing the rivers by filling the stones. These stones, as I've already quoted Wen Tiechun, represented were symbolic norms defined by the West. In other words, treading the path one defined by the Western institutions of international order. Therefore, if Mao Zedong denounced the Soviet discourse on socialism and modernization in 1956, Xi Jinping had denounced the Western discourse on modernization by proposing the Chinese style of modernization. Xi Jinping defines Chinese style modernization as modernization of huge populations, common prosperity, material and cultural ethical advancement, harmony between humanity and nature, and modernization of peaceful development. And these have been pitched against the capital-centric, materialistic, and expansionist Western modernization that leads to social disparities and ecological crises by some of China's leading scholars like Tang Weiwei of Fudan University. So in fact, these are his words. He's defending the Chinese-style modernization and denouncing Western-style modernization or development. So these discourses, at the same time, are presented as important public goods provided by China for the benefit of humanity. China opines that Western discourses of power and the practices associated with them are inadequate for creating a peaceful, just, and sustainable social order, and hence the justification for providing alternate discourses, which may not necessarily find appeal in the West, but certainly I think they are mostly, at this point in time, geared towards the developing countries, and perhaps many of them, they find appeal because they require Chinese assistance and perhaps various public goods as described by various panelists in other sessions. So now my last assumption, I will take 1 or 2 minutes and then I will conclude it. I think it is as far as India and China are concerned, and I think that the kind of understanding and equilibrium India struck with China, I say post 1988 Rajiv Gandhi visit, all up to say perhaps 2008 or so, it has been lost. It has been lost primarily due to the widening asymmetries between two, and I need not to suffice these by showing data as far as GDP or the military capabilities, or other strengths of China, especially in the field of technology, are concerned. So this parity, which was there during, say, last 30 years or so, it has been disturbed, and that's why I think China feels no compulsion to listen to India or give India space, whether it is at the regional level or at the international level, because it believes that India has a lot of India has to catch up with China, and it believes it is not quite that. So therefore, the kind of assertiveness we have witnessed along our borders, and also in the South China Sea, the way China has altered the existing status quo, to start with the South China Sea and now the Taiwan Straits by crossing the medium line. So the same scheme of things it has applied along the borders. So today, I think the change of status quo along India-China border, it is the result of this lost equilibrium and widening asymmetries, because China believes the balance of power, it has favored it, and it doesn't have any compulsion to give any space to India. More so, it believes that it can do that by its proxies like Pakistan, and perhaps the way Mao strategized in 1956, Xi Jinping is also doing the same thing, converting neutrals into friends, friends into pivot, and so on and so forth. So this strategy, I think it will continue, and India perhaps need to be careful about China's infrastructure development across the LSE, because in Tibet alone, if we see last two 5-year plans, it has invested $23 billion US in Tibet alone, enhancing its infrastructure, especially the roads to 120 kilometers, 120,000 kilometers roads just in Tibet. So therefore, I think this competition continuum between India and China, it will continue to go, and perhaps we have to devise ways out to deal with our China's dilemma. With these words, I thank you all for your patience.
Thank you very much, Deepak, for that very comprehensive exposition on Xi Jinping's China's decisive departure from the Tangist maxim, keep a low profile. The reason we were having that exchange is because clearly for you the renunciation and denunciation are both two sides of the same coin, and the way I looked at it, denunciation of former leaders, particularly China's Deng Xiaoping's stature, is not quite the Chinese style, but I would say you made a comprehensive case for your argument. Thank you very much. Fitting end to this 2 days deliberations. Aravind, can I now request you, our co-convener for this conference, to present the rapporteur's report.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Before I begin, I just want to start with one or two examples, narratives, and stories. No matter how in public optics China looks confident, that is not the fact. This is a story when China was signing the WTO agreement, and there was a meeting convened, and Jiang Zemin was about to sign. The first question he asked the secretary, when the secretary briefed him that, Mr. President, we are going to let go tariff on approximately 20 to 25,000 products. Before he finished his sentence, Jiang Zemin asked him, will the party collapse? And the secretary says no. He moves to the second question. He said that we have to give up a large chunk of our trade with Europe and US, and we are negotiating with them. He again cut short and asked him, will the party collapse? And again, he says no, party will not collapse. The last question, the secretary says that we have been laying off workers since 95, 94, the Surongchi announces the re-engineering of economic modeling, and then since then the laying off starts taking place, and then SOE restructuring takes place. The third question again, Jiang Zemin asks, will the party collapse? And he says no, and then only he signs. I was mentioning this thing in the earlier sessions also. There is a lot deep thinking takes place when we read that newspaper, we read a decision of a Chinese party or leadership decision in the newspapers. What happened over the period of last 2 days is just a glimpse of all this. We have been talking, we have been deliberating on a number of issues and dimensions of party and its influence in two different ends, terminals, say, affecting the state and then the people, and in between everything. So with that, I'm being assigned to give this short report, which is an official report. There were a lot of things the organizers were doing and other things. We were also looking through the pool, and half of my report is written looking at the pool. So absolutely, once this is over, we're going to take benefit of that. So at the outset, I need to, first of all, thank, because I'm part of ICS, but I must thank the organizers, ICS, Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, and Goa University, for making this conference possible and holding it in Goa and giving an example. Second thing which I'm very happy about is the, as in political economist, numbers, ratio. There was one factor of demography here which I'm very pleasant to talk about. From the first IFC in 2017 until today, fifth one, we have seen a demographic change of participation in the conference. We see the ratio of young scholars, rising scholars, as well as established scholars. That ratio is 1-to-1, which is absolutely promising. And this is a good sign for everyone who come and present papers and also are open to critics and the feedback and improve upon that. So that is the biggest takeaway of this conference I want to start with. Now, one more important thing in my panel earlier, Priyanka mentioned about 1982 12th Party Congress. What happened in 12th Party Congress was, in the 12th Party Congress, there was a decisive victory of the Tang faction vis-a-vis Maoist opponents. In the Central Party Committee, there were 210 full members and 138 alternate members, and overwhelmingly, there was a domination of Tang Xiaoping's faction. We're talking about 1982, and we're talking about 2022, 20th Party Congress. There are the only two big points which we can derive is how the polemics or how the metaphor narratives shape party and how that has been operationalized or used in the day-to-day activities. We cannot forget 1982. I somewhere see, I'll leave this question to the August audience in next 20 years, possibly after a 5-party Congress, can we see the new 1980 Congress where there will be new, defeat of, I should not say it, but will there be a defeat of Xi faction and new factions coming up? Only time will say that. With that, I want to start briefing of my observations and the key takeaway points of this 5th IFC. To start with, important key lessons were left by the Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University, who delivered the keynote address, where she raised an important question whether China is a revisionist state. And she went on talking about ECCP, a transnational corporation of the world, and the example she gave is that, or the example of historical materialism the Chinese Communist Party is using. The historical materialism is inverse now, where the party is saying that the rise of the East vis-a-vis the demise of the West is a new premise of the historical materialism, which is, I think, a fundamental statement for all of us to talk about. Starting with about the sessions, we had very enriching, engageful of sessions. The first one with the party governance and leadership. The 3 papers by Dr. Bhim Subba, Dr. Shen, and Dr. Roger Liu reflected on the rising prominence of military-civil fusion, united front work, and how this has been seen from the optics of party leadership and mapping of several different undercurrents. Starting with representatives of various intra-elite political opinions, experience groups, structural groups, and functional pressure groups, has been going through ideological, organizational, and operational transformation. This was discussed in the panel, along with how the civil-military collaboration and how that collaboration has been used to channelize the propaganda through United Front was also a very prominent takeaway from this session. Going forward, the session on ideas and narratives, which saw the panel including Professor Acharya, Dr. Tuvia Garing, and Dr. Anand Krishnans, they made something fundamental observations through their presentations, which were not only intriguing but also stimulating. For example, idea and narratives effectively used to tailor ideological and existential ecosystems of the party. Everyone knows that Xi's revolution's ultimate objective is his China dream, right? The rejuvenation of the great nation. So as noted earlier, however, Xi's predecessors also share the same goal. What makes Xi's revolution distinctive is the strategy he has pursued, and this session contributed in more significant details. So I must congratulate the paper presenters of this session. The session on parties' global interest was somewhere we started looking at how these ideas are being now operationalized beyond China's boundaries. And as a result of it, starting with Professor Gudin Walker, who spoke about legitimacy and the transformative stages of legitimacy, and its interrelations with the party and the leadership was amazing, and I was personally amazed with the expanse and the way the argument was put forth. And in the fight to reclaim the party's legitimacy, there was no room for alternative voices and perspective. And if you want to look and counter together, or maybe party to formulate ideas for the PLA to carry it forward. So I think that panel also provided one of the important, gave us important takeaways, and we look forward to working on that further. In the next session, party and economy, I'm very biased towards economy, but when I started writing, it was getting longer and longer, so I was kept on cutting it. Hey, but there was, economists are never correct. You had been economists always correct, 1929 wouldn't have happened, 78 wouldn't have happened, 85, 94, 2000, 2008 wouldn't have happened always. So that's the reason party never believes in economy or economists. That's the reason what Venkat was trying to say, economy is not a priority. Partially, I agree, 10%, 10, 20%. See, again, percentages there. Well, party and economy has been an important session where the panelists, Dr. Priyanka Pandit, Professor Dieter, and Professor Venkat Raman's deliberation interventions covered an extensive list of problems Chinese leaders face. And as in his report itself, Xi Jinping in the 20th Party Congress, he pointed out two important challenges about productivity challenges and unemployment. The panel in these sessions added to this debate by raising some important questions about the rising conflict over China's economic ambitions and material existential crisis grappling Chinese leadership, especially the role of state-owned enterprises. The real estate crisis and China's economic decision-making crisis were brought on the table. And as a result of it, this was one of the important sessions which covered these aspects of the deliberation and the influence and role of party. Now, the following session was on the narrative building abroad. As we experience, Xi Jinping has increasingly constrained the avenues and opportunities by which foreign ideas, culture, and in some cases, capital can enter the country by building a virtual wall of regulatory and legal fences. We can see that there has been technological impediments being erected. And as a result of it, the session on party's narrative building abroad shed light on how party, under the leadership of Xi, has pushed, for example, to enhance the flow of ideas, influences significantly from China to the outside world through various mediums of control and power. The presentation by Dr. Chung Han Wu has been, and Dr. Jabin Jacob's presentations were underlined how the country's party leaders are mostly tough-minded realists convinced of the absolute rightness of China's international claims and the certainty of national rise succeeding. Dr. Chen Yushe indicated that ethnic faultiness might threaten party's legacy on a path to further focus assimilation of minorities. So that was another key takeaway from this session. The concluding session on regional policy, where we had a panel including Dr. Yamit Alperin, then Dr. Avinash Godbole, and Chang Yonghee, deliberated on how substantial the shift on China's foreign policy has been, but how reliable and distinctive is China's approach towards multilateral regional policy institutions. While Dr. Godbole spoke on China's responses to Indo-Pacific, the presentation by Dr. Alperin and Dr. Chang covered Middle Eastern and East Asian countries. These papers broadly debated the diversity of methods China employs to advance its interest. Overall, the session provided some essential takeaways points with regard to China's efforts to expand its influence across different geographic regions, as well as the implications of those efforts for the United States and the international order. I purposely use United States over here. And those were the sessions which were very fruitful and engaging, and I'm quite satisfied, and I'm looking forward to the papers. There is some announcement to be made, but I'll leave it to the convener. And in the end, this is not, I must not thank anyone over here, but this is my first opportunity on behalf of organizers I'm taking here. So let me mention Cass, Dr. Haack, and Pankaj Madan for being so generous and tolerant towards the organizers, every one of us, and without the support, this conference wouldn't have been possible. So that is something important when you organize conference and when you implement your plans and meet each other. The importance is also, or importance should be also given to the organizers and the important partners like CAS and Goa University. Thank you so much once again.
Yeah, thank you, Aravind. So can I now request Dr. Adrian Haack to deliver his closing remarks?
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, I want to thank first of all scholars who participated here. But as we all know, a conference is like the ice in the Arctic. Only 10% is above the sea level and the rest is underwater and you cannot see it. And 90% of a conference is actually not the speeches on the stage. It is making sure that people get picked up from the airport, that there are no spelling mistakes in the name signs, that the report will be edited on time. So at this point, I want to make a big thank you to everyone who was involved in the background, all the students who worked very hard for this conference, to ICS, to Professor Alka and all your entire team, and also to the accounting team of CAS. They all contributed to this great event, and it was indeed a great event. Actually, I would say it was not the India Forum on China, it was an international forum on China in India. Because it was really a conference not only on an international academic standard, but also with scholars from all around the world. So I think we can summarize, it was not, let's say, an Indian conference with a few foreigners. You really were able to make this event a really international one. And that's, I think, already applause. And all these scholars came from different academic fields, which I thought was very fruitful. We had empiric social science, we had economists, we had an historic viewpoint, and we also had very theoretical discussions. And I would also say it was a very reflected conference. So, of course, we didn't, let's say, kept distance to critical issues. We touched a lot of critical issues, but for sure it was not an anti-China conference or something like that. It was purely an academic one, very constructive and very reflective and very tolerant as well. And this is what Konrad-Adenauer Foundation does in more than 100 countries. And I like to quote Konrad Adenauer, who gave name to our foundation and who was also first Chancellor of Germany, who said, "We all have to live under the same sky, but we can choose our horizon." And I think this horizon of each of us is just rising if we have viewpoints from other parts of the world. And let me therefore come over to these other parts of the world, because during the conference I was asking myself the question if the terminologies we are using are still up to date. So is there a Western discourse on China? Because from my perspective the discourse was very similar from all of us. And who's included in this West? And also Global South. Is there still something we can call Global South? Is India as the 5th biggest economy, can you still consider that as Global South, or is India part of the West? So I would say these terminologies are maybe also we have to reconfigure them maybe. This is of course not happening overnight, and maybe I'm also wrong, maybe they still fit. And another thing, or another question, or I was raising at this conference is how much China is a black box to many extents. So we had this in the panel of, for when it comes to economic of China, the real estate bubble. We don't even know who has this real estate bubble in its books. And also when it comes to the very first panel, when we were talking about the internal elite, the power structure within China, how little we know about these people on top of this big country. And let me also make a humoristic remark, because when there were also discussions about Marxism or the role of Marxism in China, and it was labeled as an opposite of what was called Western values. And the funny thing is, Marx was actually a German gentleman, and he's one of the Germans gentlemen you often get confronted with when you are outside of Germany in various parts of the world. And the other one, who was living at the same time like Marx, just very close by, was Gottlieb Daimler, the founder of Mercedes-Benz. And you can really good distinguish the world in between two categories. There are those who want to implement Marxism and those who want to buy a Mercedes. And this is a very German habit. We are a romantic culture, and we make up things like Marxism, but we don't use them at home. And sometimes we are afraid that people in other parts of the world took it so serious, while we are only busy with building and selling Mercedes-Benz. But let me get back to serious. I wish all of you, so I enjoyed all the talks also besides the panels, and I wish each of you the very best for the future, personally and as scholars. You are all great consultants in your respected fields, and I hope what you heard here, what you learned here, will spread into your countries, in politics, in science, in media. And I will finish with one fact about Belt and Road. Belt and Road initiative is active in less countries than Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. So the chance that you go back home and there is an office of us is very high. And my colleagues in your home countries would be very delighted if you get in touch and stay in touch with Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Admirable sentiments, and I'm sure most of them are heartily reciprocated here. I think you have put a whole lot of issues for reflection, and maybe you have even given us ideas for the next 6th IFC. But about this black box that is China that we meet annually to open, unpack, I think China is becoming less of a black box as we move along. The question is, do we have the right kind of equipment, attitude, and mindsets to actually unpack what's in this black box? It's a tremendously hard, tremendously difficult exercise, requiring a lot of rigor, a lot of discipline. And I think what we have collectively gone through over the last 2 days shows that it is possible to actually unpack. Except that many times I feel that scholars are working in their own little fields, and somewhere the big picture or the comprehensive picture gets a bit clouded over. So each one, like the 6 blind men and the elephant, are holding on to their respective parts of China. So the question and the challenge really is that how do we bring this to make a comprehensive picture? But we all are engaged, as you said, scholars in their own way. It's both a professional, academic, and a philosophical journey in many ways. And the journey is obviously more important. In the Indian philosophical tradition, we have a saying, charati charato bhagaha. The journey itself is the destination. And so I look forward to many more such journeys in the years ahead. And now our thanks in full measure will be delivered by Colonel Roy from the Institute of Chinese Studies.
Good evening, everyone. I feel honored and privileged to have this opportunity to propose a word of thanks on this special occasion. First and foremost, I would like to thank Professor Alka Acharya, convener, 5th IFC at Goa, and Director, Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi, for giving me this opportunity. The 5th IFC at Goa, organized in partnership with Delhi office of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung at Goa University, and Goa University has been a huge success. The panelists were excellent. The participants were full of enthusiasm, and perhaps the most interesting bits of conversation happened across the dining table during breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Since arriving in Goa, we have had fruitful discussions, both inside as well as outside the conference venue. And I have had many to thank for playing their part so well, if I may add. I am grateful to Professor Shantishri Pandit, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, for kicking start the conference on a very positive and spirited note. Similarly, Professor B.R. Deepak, please accept my sincere gratitude for delivering the valedictory remarks. We are also fortunate to be partnering with 2 highly renowned organizations for organizing 5th IFC at Goa, Dr. Adrian Haack. We are truly delighted, sir, for this opportunity to team up once again. Mr. Madan, Ashish, and the entire CAST team, we cannot thank you enough for everything. Professor Gangopathyay, thank you for sending in your best team to help us with this forum. The team from Goa University has been nothing but a blessing from an organization perspective. They were sharp, sincere, enthusiastic, and the brightest of bunch of youngsters. I sincerely wish them a very bright future. Now, my heartfelt gratitude for each and every speaker for sharing your hard work and experience with all of us. Your presence here has meant a lot to us, not only as organizers, but as scholars and enthusiasts of the subject. Hearing you has been an absolute pleasure. On behalf of ICS, I also would like to extend our sincere gratitude to officers from armed forces, from various training institutes across India. We are grateful to Lieutenant General Virender Bhatt. He just left previous session. Commandant Defense Service Staff College and officers from College of Defense Management, Naval War College, Goa, and Headquarter IDS, New Delhi. We are indeed hopeful and optimistic our intellectual association will continue to flourish in the future as well. We did have a moment of nervousness yesterday when we saw the conference room overflowing to extent where some of our young participants had to stand to hear the speakers. However, I feel this is a mark of tremendously successful event where the audience is willing to put their comfort behind to be able to hear the speakers. My most sincere gratitude to the audience. A lot of them had to leave early, but I'm thankful to their presence. Finally, my colleagues at ICS, both at the forefront and also in the background, I would like to thank each of them, especially Dr. Rija, she's in New Delhi at the moment, and Yamini. Their contributions are duly noted, although they couldn't be here presently. With this, I hand over the floor to Dr. Preksha, my colleague, Thank you very much once again.
So my little few words now have a postscript since the vote of thanks is done. You all paper presenters would be at least recalling that in my original mail I had requested that we would be looking forward to papers which we would like to bring out in a volume. So I would like to remind our paper presenters that I will be sending a more detailed mail shortly, but to start thinking about putting your presentations together in a more formal structure. We would be very delighted if we could get the final papers by the end of December so that we can move towards a swift publication. Otherwise, you know, these things will then get stretched beyond control. So with those words, I end my postscript and picture.
Now let me conclude the 5th IFC at Goa by thanking Professor B.R. Deepak, Dr. Adrian Haack, Honorary, and Professor Alka Acharya for joining us for the valedictory session. I'd also like to thank the participants for actively participating through both days of the conference and making the deliberations. On behalf of ICH, I would also like to thank our partners, the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung and Goa University, as well as Capri and What China Reads, our event supporters. Thank you once again for joining us. We will have dinner at 7 p.m. In Mango Terrace. It's a bit of a walk, so our volunteers will assist you from the lobby. Thank you so much.